Okay, can I welcome you to the Cabinet meeting of Monday the 22nd of February. It's a remote meeting, as you can see. Apologies for absence. Then I do have one, and that's from Councillor Ben Gray, who is away on a business meeting. So he gives his apologies. Second item is minutes of the previous meeting, which you've all had circulated to you. And can I ask if anybody agrees them as a true record, please?
Happy to second, Leader.
Thank you very much. In that case, I'll go on to the third item, which is the received declarations of interest. I think there are a couple. Margaret, I'll bring you in first.
Yeah, item 7 and 15. Pay rise, pay policy because I have members of my family working in the authority, and 15 is because I'm a council tenant and it is the housing revenue. Okay.
Yeah, housing revenue account, and we set in rents and things, but you have a dispensation to stay and speak.
Yes, I have. Yes.
Okay. That's Margaret. Liz, I think you have some.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I do. I would like to declare a personal and prejudicial interest in agenda items 9 and 12. I care for a person that uses the Vales Telecare service, and as I manage their financial accounts, I'm responsible for paying those bills.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll obviously withdraw while we're discussing those reports.
Yeah, as a result, I think I might move the agenda around a little, so I'll come to that as we go through. I've got declarations as well in terms of pay policy, because my daughter works for the authority, but I have dispensation to stay, to vote and to speak. I will also declare one that I don't think is in there, because I've been looking desperately for fees and charges for myself for the I'm president of the Carrickson Bowls Club, but because they're out on a lease, I don't think it's actually covered in the report at all. But just in case, and I don't think it's necessary, so I don't think I have to declare it. But I'll just remind you, I am a president. I have dispensation to stay, speak, etc. And the other issue is in relation to the pay policy, which is at items a reference of 7, item 7, and then later in terms of that, what I intend to do, because there's officers need to withdraw, senior officers need to withdraw. The ones that would stay would be the person taking the minutes, and also I know that Liz has declared an interest in terms. No, myself and Margaret have declared an interest, but I'll take that to the end. What I think I'll also do, if that's okay with you, is take the items of fees and charges at the end as well, so it gives so Liz doesn't have to stay, so we can get through most of the business before anybody has to start declaring things, if that's okay with you. The other thing that I intend to do is to bring forward the reference item number 22, which is supporting the recruitment and retention of qualified social workers in the children and young people services. It's under as a report from the Cabinet member for social care and health, but in fact it's actually a report from me because it's to do with pay and policy and staffing. So without further ado, we'll try and get through this in an orderly manner if I possibly can. It's a complicated agenda today. Before we go into the references, what I normally do at this stage is to remind people that we are still within COVID-19, that people still need to take care, that the majority of the group 4, 1 to 4 have had vaccination should they wish to have it, and obviously things are on track for that. But I can still need to remind people that we're still within COVID-19, and thankfully there's been some changes, some small changes at the moment with schools, and hopefully the First Minister will announce some progressive changes and relaxation as time goes on, but that can only happen if everybody adheres to the restrictions. Okay, I will say no more. In relation to the references, there are 2 references, 4 and 5, one from the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, which is item 4, and item 5 from the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee in relation to the corporate joint committees. If you recall, we considered report and sent in our responses, but also agreed there would be an addendum if necessary, if any scrutiny committee wished to make any changes, recommendations or suggestions. Both these reports are the references back from those committees, and you can read what it says for yourselves. Basically, the comments from E&R were that there was one comment felt that the corporate joint committees wouldn't be established until after the 2020 local government elections, as this would be likely to change in membership. I know there's a push for it to be, in fact, February of 2022, sorry. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. There was also concern regarding the public consultation and the opportunities for members of the public to make their views known. The thing had been moving around for a long time, but that is a view that they put forward. And they also were concerned that the corporate joint committees could be seen as an extra layer of government, and I think that's something that we actually said at one time. And then there was also a comment in relation to the importance of regional working be stressed and highlighted from that committee. Then following on from that, it was referred to corporate performance and resources, and again they felt that this was local government reform by the back door. They also made the point that increased workload and responsibility for council leaders, which could impact on their own local authorities' work, and I understand the comments from that, but there is an opportunity for leaders to put in substitutes. There's a lack of detail in relation to scrutiny of CJCs, which is a fair point, because currently the CJCs have not been appointed, and therefore I would have thought that the scrutiny arrangements would come at a later date, but there's comments relating to that. There was also comments in relation to internal and external bureaucracy implications, which is another tier, I guess it means, and the financial impact and resources of staff resilience on the local authorities. In relation to both those comments, I think the best thing we can do is to actually forward those comments from our scrutiny committees to Welsh Government, as we said we would do. So I think, I know I've gone on and talked about them, but I think he was right to actually highlight their comments, because I think they were very relevant. And some of the comments are the ones that have been made over the last several months, and including our responses too. So if I can have your agreement that we note the comments at 4 and 5, and that those comments be sent by the Managing Director or otherwise to Welsh Government, just to air the views of our scrutiny committee so they're aware of them. Okay.
Thanks, Leader. I'll formally second.
Good, thank you. The next item is item 6. Again, it's a reference to Local Government and Elections Bill Part 6, which is to do with performance and governance of principal councils and a consultative response. Again, they looked at the matter, and although the scrutiny committee endorsed the consultation responses, which we'd already sent in, the cabinet were asked to make sure there was a robust recruitment and training process should be developed by the appointment of the audit and governance committee lay members. Basically, the change in the way the audit works and calling it something different, but also adding that they wanted more public participation from members of the public on it. And the scrutiny committee are asking us to ensure that there's a robust recruitment and training program, which is absolutely sensible and something we would do anyway. So I think we note that and endorse their comments, if that's all right with you. Yeah. Okay, good. In relation to item 7, which is the pay policy, I will defer that until later if I can, as I agreed. The next one is in relation to item 8, is a reference on corporate performance and resources scrutiny committee on the 11th of February. This is in relation to the Local Democracy and Boundary Commission for Wales. Basically, what's happened is that we've been through the process. The Commission has reported. They have sent their comments to Welsh Government. There is still a point at this time that anybody can still make comments, but not to the Commission, but to Welsh Government. There was a debate about the Commission's findings, and the report was noted. There was a point in the Commission's attention was to be drawn to the incorrect Welsh translation of Saint Athan, at paragraph 65 of the Commission's report. Basically, they called it San Athan instead of San Tathan with a T, Tathan with a T. So that I think the managing officer has brought that to the attention of both the Commission and Welsh Government. But just for belt and braces, I think we should write to the Welsh Government pointing out that that we think there is a mistake in the transmission. I just had a confirmation that the monitoring officer has in fact sent that off. So there's no. So in fact we can note the fact that the monitoring officer sent it off. And finally, that the consideration is given to raising the public awareness of the Welsh Government order when it's available, because currently it's not, and that a review of polling stations be undertaken as deemed appropriate following receipt of the order. Basically, I think we should note that at this stage we have no order. The only other thing is to consider is, if you recall, we have recently done a review of all polling stations anyway in the last year or so. And therefore it may not be applicable to do that, but I think we can deal with that as and when. And the reason they brought that to attention is that clearly there are different changes within the ward boundaries within the Commission report. It is now for Welsh Government to either accept, reject or change those Commission recommendations. So at this stage I think we note the recommendations. That's okay with you, and also note the fact that the monitoring officer has pointed out the error in the Commission's report. The next item is item 9, which is again the Vale Glamorgan Council proposed fees and charges, and I'm going to delay that till the end too, if I can. Okay, if I go on to, there were quite a lot of references this time. If I can go on to the main body of the report. So the first one being the use of the Managing Director's emergency powers. As you know, certain aspects of work need to be carried out through emergency procedures, and this is a matter for noting by the Cabinet, but obviously the issues concerned aren't covered within the report. They cover things like the finalisation of the Quality Management Revocation Order, which was in Cogan. That was necessary. The use of home learning laptops, really important. Obviously, going forward with the Penarth Older Persons Housing with complex care needs, so we don't want to delay that. And there are other issues in relation to it, which are all down in the report. Unless anybody wants to raise any of them or highlight any of them, I think, to be honest, we just need to note them. Unless anybody's got anything to raise, but they are covered fully within the report. So agreed? Good, thank you. The next item is the Strategic Collaborative Working Initiatives, which is an update. Again, this is something which we have on a very regular basis. And this is just to provide us with the update. As we know, collaborative working activity has increased in recent years. It is challenging, particularly in terms of the financial climate and valuing the work of partnership. The Cabinet receives a quarterly update, and this is it. The compendium of strategic work initiatives, which is you can find at Appendix A, provides an oversight of the strategic level collaborative working activity. The report also provides Cabinet with an upgrade regarding the update regarding the provision of the forthcoming Local Government and Elections Bill in the context of collaborative working. The Compendium A, as I said, gives an oversight of the work, and that provides a description of the various initiatives under the review. However, you also have to realise that the Compendium at Appendix A is not an exhaustive list, because there are many operational level collaboration efforts which carry on as business as usual, for want of a better term. But you do need to understand that there are some things which have been removed. There are 2 initiatives, and that's covered in point 2.3. 2 initiatives have been removed. The Regional Steering Group has been removed, as the arrangements are now well embedded with social services. It suggested that this initiative is removed, which I think is sensible. And the second one is the collection and delivery of physical mail, which was a partnership between Bridgend and ourselves, which has now contract has come to an end, and we are now carrying out a different procedure and procurement of a hybrid mail support supplier for the council. So they need to be taken out. There's also one new initiative, which is the Regional Skills Partnership Local Authority Cluster Group. This enables support to the Regional Skills Partnership and to advise the Welsh Government on the strategic direction of travel for skills and employment within the region. Over the next 3 years, there's recommended that these Regional Skills Partnership Employment and Skills Board will work on areas of growth and decline, but basically this is a local element of the regional element. Let's put it that way. There's also an item here in relation to collaboration in the pandemic, and that's covered in paragraphs 2.5, 2.6. And again, there's the collaboration and local government reform, which is covered in 2.7. If you remember, the Welsh Government Green Paper consulted had a consultation document about strengthening local government. It set out the Welsh Government statement on the intent about the future local government in Wales, specifying their desire to create larger, stronger authorities to secure financial viability within councils and ensure their sustainability and provide a platform of transformation and delivery. We did consider that, if you recall, and that was on 6th of June 2018. Since then, there's a Local Government Election Wales Act, which was published on the 18th of November. That was it was a bill at that stage. The bill was agreed by the Senate in November, and now given royal assent in January 20th, 2021. The report also then gives an itemized area on paragraph 210 for us to receive the implications of the bill, and an action plan has been developed. And in item 210 is the bill has various and wide-ranging aspects which are covered within the bullet points within the report, which you can read for yourself, or anybody else can for that matter. So basically, the Cabinet are asked to note the strategic collaborative working initiative that are in place to support the delivery and development of council services and the council's wellbeing outcomes and objectives, that this report be circulated by email to all Vale Glamorgan council elected members and members of the Public Service Board. I think we could add in there they could go to the town and community councils too. I think that would be a good idea if we could. And that further updates are provided to Cabinet on a quarterly basis and in accordance with the Forward Work Programme. I don't know if anybody wants to make any comments in relation to, I would have thought somebody might want to say something in relation to the collaboration during the pandemic. And I think Liz was about to do that. Liz.
I was indeed, Leader, thank you. I think it's worth noting that, as we always say when we bring this report to Cabinet, that the levels of collaboration within Wales are quite remarkable, and different types of collaboration. Sometimes it's on sort of 2 councils working together, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 10, depending upon need. But what that has done is meant that communication, those relationships were already there when we went into a pandemic, and they were then ramped up. I think nobody knows more than the new leader that daily, if not hourly, communication was taking place at some of the peaks of the pandemic to enable councils to act either individually or collaboratively in a very fast, responsive and fleet of foot way to the needs of the pandemic. So I think that we'd always said that we do work closely together within Wales, and specifically within South East Wales. And I think this is obviously a demonstration of that, which has borne fruit within the last year. And I'd be happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you very much. Has anybody got any comments? Other comments? No? Okay, so we move the recommendations. Thank you. Move to item 12, which is the proposed charges, fees and charges, and again, as I said, I'll take that later, so I'll put that to one side if I could. Then we come to item 13, which is the capital strategy and final capital proposals for 21-22 to 25-26. I suppose one of the most important reports we have. The report does present the capital strategy for the council for 21-22 and the final capital proposals for 21-22 to 25-26. The capital strategy actually provides a framework which outlines how capital expenditure, capital financing and treasury management activity contribute to the provision of the council's corporate objectives. The strategy also takes a longer term view of the council's capital investment priorities and how those priorities may be funded. Having considered these priorities, the possible funding available over the current 10 years are also put in there. Estimates are in there that the funding gap in terms of funding available and the services we wish to provide is an estimated as a funding gap could be in the region of £12 million. So the capital strategy will be updated on an annual basis, and the funding gap obviously will be reviewed on a regular basis during that time too. But clearly, we're putting together a capital programme which still needs funding, and that funding will be considered in due course. But it is the strategy for the future. In terms of the initial capital programme that were presented to Cabinet in November, if you recall, at that time we'd not received a provisional settlement from Welsh Government. It did go through a scrutiny arrangements, but the provisional settlement from Welsh Government was received, I think, on the 22nd of December, and that was again being considered by Cabinet on the 8th of February, and then went to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 11th of February, that is. So the proposed new schemes are now included in the capital programme 21-22 to 25-26, and they are detailed within the paragraph 2.25 of the report. So I won't go into any detail than that. The programme details in this report will be funded through a number of different sources, as you know, through various areas of things like general capital funding, section 106, sale of assets, use of reserves, or borrowing money, but clearly that's contained within the report too. So the proposed programme for 21-22 to 25-26 is also attached at Appendix 2, and that shows a total spend of £107 million in 21-22, and a total 5-year programme in excess of £249 million. So it is quite a substantial capital programme, particularly in terms of things like 21st century schools. The programme also includes, thankfully, 480k for road surfacing, resurfacing. We understand from Welsh Government, they've indicated that the highway refurbishment grant will continue this year. However, we do not have the details of the award as yet, and because they've not been received, but the capital programme will be amended, and we can do that through normal processes accordingly when the final offer letter has been received. So we know it's going to be in that ballpark figure, but we will deal with that when the final statement comes in. In terms of total Band B programme for 21st century schools, that is £136 million, and it's anticipated that £118 million will be spent between 21-22 to 25-26. So the report also details the levels of investment required to maintain the WHQS standards of our houses, flood prevention works, funding for disabled facilities grants, and funding in relation to the Barry Regeneration Partnership. It is a comprehensive report which has to go on to Council. So can I make the following recommendations, please? That Cabinet recommend to Council that the capital strategy for 21-22 as set out in Appendix 1 is approved. 2, that the Cabinet recommend to Council that the final capital programme for the years 21-22 to 25-26 as set out in Appendix 2 be approved. The Cabinet recommend to the Council that the Managing Director and the Head of Finance, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Performance Resources, is given delegated authority to make additions, deletions or transfers to or from the 21-22 to 25-26 Housing Improvement Programme as appropriate. 4, the Cabinet recommend to Council that the Managing Director and the Head of Finance, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources, given delegated authority to make additions, deletions or transfers to or from 21-22 to 25-26 asset renewal budget as appropriate. 5, that the Cabinet recommend to the Council that the Managing Director and the Head of Finance, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources, is given delegated authority to make additions, deletions or transfers to Section 106 funding schemes, subject to member consultation as required under the existing process. And 6, that the Cabinet recommend to Council that the Managing Director, Head of Finance, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources, is given delegated authority to make additions, deletions or transfers to or from the Energy Management Scheme. And that finally 7, that the Cabinet recommend to Council that the Managing Director and the Head of Finance, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources, is given delegated authority to make additions, deletions or transfers to or from the Building Strong Communities Fund schemes. So I have to read it out in full, but I think it's important that I do. Before I bring any member in, I don't know if any of the officers, Alice, for example, wants to make any comment or is happy with the report as it stands.
No comments from me. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, guys. In that case, I'd always get the hands up. I think Liz has got a hand up.
Yes, it is me. Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to draw attention, as you might expect, to the school investment programme, which is covered on para 2.3 onwards. Really good progress there. We've currently got 3 secondary schools on site and 2 primary schools, with more in the pipeline, as we've obviously taken things like the Centre for Learning and Wellbeing and the resource bases, working through the processes with the Escarderi extension, etc. And if I could report to Cabinet that on Thursday of last week, I had a review meeting on site at the 3 secondary schools in Barry to look at progress. All are coming along absolutely brilliantly, at least on time and certainly on budget. But more importantly, Whitmore High School is actually so ahead of budget. It looks very much as if the young people will be moving into that school June of this year rather than September, which will give them increased space, increased social distancing opportunities within that school. So really, really good progress there. And then also paragraph 3.9 details the targeted regeneration investment, which is what people will see providing the support for our town centres as they come out of lockdown going forward, and some of the banners in Thompson Street and the park that's ready to work in Penarth, that sort of thing. So that's covered in there. So thank you, Leader, and happy to second the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Obviously goes on to Council. Anybody else got any comments? No. Okay, thank you. In that case, I'll go to item 14, which is the final proposals for the revenue budget for 21-22. As you know, the initial revenue budget was presented to Cabinet in November. We didn't have the provisional settlement, but we did have to make certain assumptions at that time. One of the assumptions was that there would be reported shortfall of about £12.8 million, and that we suggested at that time council tax rise of 4.9%. That was considered by all scrutiny committees in December. The provisional figures for next year were then given to us by Welsh Government on the 22nd of December. And for this council, the settlement reports totaled a standard spending assessment, an SSA as everybody calls it, of £257.077 million, which represents an adjusted increase of £12.583 million over last year, and this is an increase of 5.15%. There is no funding provided through the Revenue Support Grant for new responsibilities for the coming year, although there is a transfer into the Rate Support Grant, the RSG, settlement in 2021-22 of 176k for 2021 in relation to the impact of teachers' pay. The Council's provisional settlement figures from Welsh Government are £124.398 million for the revenue support grant itself and £43.918 million for non-domestic rates. Together, these are aggregated and they are now they're finally called the Final Aggregated External Finance, AEF, if you add them together, it comes to £168.316 million for the Council. So when taking into account the adjustments for transfer mentioned above, the effective increase of AEF, the Aggregated External Finance, for the Council from the previous year is £7.119 million or 4.42%. As I said, the initial budget was modelled on certain assumptions: cash flat, 1% positive, 1% negative. As a consequence, the revised initial budget proposals were considered by Cabinet on the 8th of February, as we all know, and again they were referred to Corporate Performance Resources on the 11th of February. The Council's annual budget consultation exercise began in December and closed in January. The full details of the consultation can be found in Appendix B to the report. The proposal for the revenue budget for 21-22 has been set in line with the current financial strategy, and again the summary of the overall position is attached at Appendix C to the report. The Budget Working Group had to review what the issues since knowing the provisional settlement, and we've reviewed the cost pressures. Those which cannot be mitigated or reduced are within the net growth figure of £9.6 million. There are some severe challenges within the authority in terms of social services in particular, and as a result of COVID-19, and they really cannot be mitigated or reduced. That breakdown is shown in the summary at Appendix D. There are also efficiencies which would have to be reviewed, and if you remember, we had something like £116,000 in the original report. But you also have to remember that there have been savings of in excess of £59 million in the last 10 years. And each year it becomes increasingly difficult to identify budgets to reduce while still trying to maintain frontline services. So we've looked at it again, and the proposed efficiency targets for 21-22 is £500,000 with no efficiencies required from schools. And I can confirm these efficiencies have been assessed and are considered to be achievable. The report also details the proposed budgets for all services for the coming years. However, what I will try and do is summarise some of the key points. With regard to schools, this budget doesn't require schools to find any efficiencies in the new financial year and provides growth requested by the schools at the initial estimate stage. This budget will continue to fund schools at £1.321 million above their indicator base assessment for 21-22. And as a requirement of the Act, we also have to write a report in relation to that, and that can be found at Appendix A to the report. Or Appendix 1, Appendix A. With regard to other services, we'd be mindful of the pressures facing social services, and the increased demands for social services to support the ageing population in the Vale, apart from obviously those with COVID difficulties. This budget will therefore provide additional funding for that particular service. The details of this, one of the issues with social services is that we do still have funding from Welsh Government. And sometimes Welsh Government announced an increase in the grant for social services across Wales. Currently, that announcement hasn't been made, so we don't have the details at this time. But it is proposed, also within this recommendations, that proposals for any new funding received from that grant stream, in other words, Welsh Government, will be transferred to social services, in addition to the cost pressures awarded in these budget proposals. The cost pressures are significant, but however, There are also cost pressures that have been reported within environment and housing in the current financial year, and this budget also addresses these, providing some additional funding for the services for 21-22. As part of the budget setting process, we're also required to look at the budget situation for the coming financial years. So again, in doing so, we made some assumptions, and we made assumptions that there will be a cash flat settlement from Welsh Government, and the council tax will increase this time in line with 3.9% in each of the following years. If you recall, we did estimate 4.9% in previous reports. But this position will obviously have to be reassessed as part of the medium-term financial plan, and options for achieving the shortfall in savings will have to be addressed further at that stage. The report also details reserves held by this authority, together with the likely drawdown on these in the coming years. And it needs to be highlighted that between 31st of March 2020 and the 31st of March 2024, it's estimated that the level of reserves will fall by 38.9 million pounds to 42.2 million pounds. So those reserves are going to drop in the region of 40 million pounds or thereabouts. Everybody at this stage talks about the general fund, and the estimated level of the council fund reserve at the 1st of April 2021 is 10.8 million pounds. There is planned drawdown of £750,000 in 21-22, and that's already been agreed, and that's to support the implementation of the Oracle upgrade, which we agreed recently. No further drawdown is planned. And one of the reasons for that is that the council fund provides cover for unforeseen expenditure, whilst in the short term maintaining a working balance. Unforeseen expenditure can be substantial, and several instances can occur in a year. And if you recall, due to the COVID pandemic, we have had unplanned drawdown of something in the region of £3.4 million. So we're at the stage where the level of the pressures on the directorates in 2021 is evidenced, and this is an ongoing financial impact of COVID, and it's going to be difficult to predict for the new financial year. Well, there's no set minimum for the level of council fund. Some commentators use 5% as a budget guide, and that would equate to about £12.5 million for us. However, if you recall, last year we decided to set our reserves at £10 million, as agreed with the 151 officer, because it's considered that £10 million should be maintained, because we do have some prudential approach in terms of some specific reserves. But it is considered that £10 million should be maintained as a minimum level for the council fund. So I've gone on a bit, I'm sorry, but it's need to cover all the elements, I'm afraid. The budget proposed in this report would therefore set a net revenue budget of £251.653 million, so £251.653 million for 21-22, which would result in a council tax increase of 3.9%. So we are suggesting a reduction from the one we originally proposed. So in summary, balancing the budget is established as to consider and address some of the pressures, and I believe that the budget before you is achievable, and therefore I will request the following. So I will go through the recommendations if I can. Does the Cabinet recommend to Council the following: that we fix a budget for 21-22 at £251.653 million, including a provision of 290k for discretionary rate relief to rural shops and post offices and charitable organisations. For 2, we approve the budgets for 21-22 as set out in Appendix C. That we approve the recommendations regarding net growth for 21-22 as set out in Appendix D, and efficiencies as set out in Appendix E. And also the proposed draft report on education budget and indicator-based assessment, or the IBA, is set out at Appendix A, and that be endorsed, and that the Director of Learning and Skills make arrangements for it to be forwarded to the Schools Budget Forum as is usual procedure. The Cabinet is also asked to approve the following: that the Director of Learning and Skills be given delegated authority to determine the amount of money to be allocated to schools' delegated budgets after consultation with the schools' budget forum, and at 6, that the reclassification of reserves as set out in Appendix G be approved, and that finally Cabinet note that the council tax banding for 21-22 for its own purpose, excluding police and town and community council precepts, for the base budget of £251.653 million. And as I say, this does need to go on to council for final approval, and hopefully we will set a budget there for that at that time. Again, I will ask any officer if they want to make any comments. Carys, for example, at this stage.
No comment from me. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Any comments from anybody else? I can see Deputy Leader, hand up, please.
In formally seconding this, I'd also like to thank Cabinet members for agreeing the support for schools within this budget. Our schools have been absolutely magnificent throughout the pandemic, and when we met with the School Budget Forum, we said that we would do everything we possibly could to ensure that they had the increase in budget that they needed, and also that we wouldn't expect them to make cuts in order to balance books, and I'm really pleased that we've been able to do that, and I know that the School Budget Forum have viewed the budget positively.
Good. It's a difficult balancing act, but we still achieved figures above IBA, and I hope that's recognised too. But it is very, very difficult. Okay, seeing the recommendations, some gone to Cabinet, there's some to note, some to agree. Do we accept those, please? Yes, good, thank you very much. Sorry, it's me going on today. Unfortunately, it's the way it is. The next item is Agenda 15, which is the final housing revenue account budget proposals. This is the final, as I say, housing revenue account for 21-22, and proposes rents and service charges for the coming financial year commencing on the 1st of April 2021. As you know, each local housing authority, and we're one of them, is required under the Local Government and Housing Act to keep a housing revenue account. That act requires us to set a budget for their housing revenue account on an annual basis, and the budget must be set so that the housing revenue account reserve at the end of the year is not in a deficit position. We also have to work to ensure that an endeavour to the working balance on the HRA can cover any exceptional circumstances that may arise, hence the reason it shouldn't be in deficit. The initial housing revenue account proposes were considered by Cabinet on the 30th of November. They were subsequently referred to the Homes and Safe Communities and the Corporate Performance Resources Scrutiny Committee, who noted the contents. In finalising the budget, we've been mindful of the 21-22 policy for social housing rents, which are published by Welsh Government in November 2020, and the policy includes a maximum allowable uplift, which has been set at CPI, Consumer Price Index, as at September 2020, plus 1%, which would be, in this case, 1.5%. The details of how the budget have been made up are in the Cabinet report. It's proposed that the rent charges are increased by 1.5%, which is in accordance with the Welsh Government policy, and is enough to support the housing business plan for 30 years. As well as increasing the rents, the report also outlines the proposed increases in each of the charges, and these are detailed within the report. So the recommendations before you are the final housing revenue account budget for 21-22 are recommended to Council as outlined in this report. An average rent increase of 1.5% be approved and recommended to Council as set out in paragraphs 2.8 to 2.10. that 3, the increase suggested in other services as approved and recommended to Council as set out in paragraphs 211 to 24, and that 4, the charges for services outlined for 21-22 financial year be recommended to Council, and finally that all changes to rent and services charges are implemented from the 1st of April 2021, and that increased notices are sent to tenants 28 days in advance of the new charges coming into effect. So basically we are set within a policy, we're settling our rents within that policy, and it also establishes that the 30-year business plan is viable. And if anybody's got any comments, for consistency, I'll ask Caris if she's got any comments.
No, nothing from me. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Okay, is that agreed?
And formally seconded.
Thank you very much. Again, the next item is item 16. This is a Treasury Management Investment Strategy, one that everybody really loves. So I'll try and make it as brief as possible, but it is important all the same. The purpose of the report is to present the interim report for the Council's Treasury Management operations from the 1st of April to the 31st of December, and to submit for consideration the proposed 21-22 Treasury Management and Investment Strategy. Insofar as the Council's Treasury Management operations entered into for the period April to December are concerned, all activities were in accordance with the Council's approved strategy on Treasury Management, as you would expect. Interest amounting to £381,877 has been received from maturing local authority and debt management deposit facilities investments for the first 9 months for 2021, so 20 to 21. Investments were also placed with money market funds during the year, but no funds were invested in Treasury bills, as the majority of the accounting period under review, as they were offering negative returns. So it wouldn't have been a good investment. Not for us anyway. The details of the monies borrowed and repaid and those invested are outlined in the report. With regards to the Treasury Management and Investment Strategy for 21-22, the details are again contained within Appendix 1 of the report, but in summary, the strategy contains the proposed borrowing strategy for 21-22, which reflects the final capital proposals, which we dealt with earlier for 21-22 to 22-25, and the predictions with regards to interest rates for the coming years, which is going to be difficult, I think, anyway. The proposed minimum revenue provision, which is commonly called the MRP, for the coming year, the proposed minimum revenue provisions for the coming year and the capital expenditure when financed by long debt includes 2 elements of cost: interest on the repayment of the principal sums borrowed. The resources of the Council must put aside in each year to repay the principal sum borrowed is known as the MRP, which is what I just said. It's proposed that our current approach to calculating the minimum revenue provision is continued in 21-22. And these details concerned the current economic background within the Council we have to operate, COVID, Brexit, etc. Prospects of interest rates going forward, which I'm not too convinced about. Our investment strategy for 21-22 and performance targets for 21-22. I would also remind you, because everybody really understands this, is that there's a Treasury Management training session for members on the 1st of March at 4:30, which colleagues can attend if they wish to attend. So just to sum this up, it recommended that the Treasury Management interim report for the period 1st of April to the 31st of December be endorsed, that the policy for making minimum revenue provision in 2021-22 be approved, that the Cabinet recommend to Council that the proposed 21-22 Treasury Management and Investment Strategy be approved, including the specific resolution detailed in Appendix 1. I've got nothing further to say on that. I don't know if anybody else has. Everybody really understands it, but all I can tell you is we have a great finance team, and they always comply with CIPFA codes, etc. So, and I'm not going to ask Carlos for a comment at this stage because otherwise she'd be embarrassed. So, can I move the recommendation? Liz, do you want to say something, please? You're on mute, please.
I do it once in a meeting.
Always once.
I was just actually going to say that it is difficult for an awful lot of councillors to grasp, however, me included. However, we have got a training session booked, and as we do every year, to make sure that everybody is fully conversant and knows exactly what they're agreeing to.
Yeah, hopefully, yes. No, there's not an issue. I got total confidence. And all the information is contained in the report, and that's just been summarised by me, really. So if we're all happy with that, can I move on? Sorry, still me. The next item is a big one in some respects too. Is the annual equality monitoring report, and this just seeks approval of the report, which is contained in Appendix A to the report. As I said, this brings Cabinet's attention to the progress against the equality objectives of the Strategic Equality Plan for 2016 to 2020 and other actions taken to improve equality for people living and working in the Vale of Glamorgan. The report summarised what services have done to collect and analyse equality data and how people with protected characteristics have used their services. It notes that they have done what they've done to make improvements in reporting, or we have done in reporting the period 2019-2020. The report provides a commentary on the progress that has been made with each of the equality objectives and where we need to continue to focus our efforts, and the reference is made to appendices which shows the data collected and analysed by services, a detailed report on employment information and employment action plan. The background to this really is the Equality Act of 2010, and it does require a general duty on us to report an annual report by the 31st of March each year to demonstrate what we've done in order to progress things forward. The Cabinet may note that this is the final retrospective review of the equalities objectives contained in the previous strategic plan, because it lasted until 2020. But the annual equality monitoring report can be found, as I said, at Appendix A. It provides information in relation to the 8 equality objectives, which are listed on paragraph 2.2 as contained in the plan. One of the things that I think maybe we should have said in terms of the second bullet point, or third bullet point, I should say, is it says a fourth one, help staff know about equality law and staff and the public, help staff know more about equality law and staff and the public to understand the needs of the protected groups. I think we probably should have done, and I think we need to do in the future. And by virtue of that, the members of the authority too, because I think it's important that not only that the staff are involved and the members are as well. 2.3 gives you the annual equality monitoring report, shows is structured so as to meet the requirements of the Act and specific duties, and therefore it includes the 7 elements which are contained within paragraph 2.3, and they demonstrate how the relevant matters have contributed to the work, to the report. The monitoring report also contains a series of appendices, as I said, to provide further information and linkages with other relevant report. We're asked to consider and endorse Appendix A and refer it to Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee. And once approved, then we'll put it on the Council's website and to work to the Council's strategic to work and progress, I should say, the Council's strategic equality objectives for the new strategic equality plan for the period 2020 to 24, which is currently underway and will be reported to scrutiny and cabinet in due course. So as I say, this is the final report of the last plan. It gives an update, and we will be working on the updated plan in the coming months. So the recommendations are that the cabinet notes the contents of the reports and the annual equality monitoring report, Appendix A, that the cabinet endorses the report and Appendix A and refers the report to Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee for consideration, with any comments being referred back to cabinet to enable publication by the 31st of March. So I think that's pretty straightforward. I assume that if there are no reports back from cabinet, they consider it and note it, then we can simply agree it and put it on the website. Anybody got any comments? Liz, got a comment?
Yes, thanks, Lisa. I mean, apart from formally seconding it, I just would like to draw attention to parts of the report. The report under Equality Objective 2 is about closing attainment gaps of children in protected groups. And this is work that we've been doing a tremendous amount on, and it's good to see it documented here. We get the cabinet reports about the various resource bases and various facilities that we are bringing together for children with additional learning needs, and this actually explains why we're doing it, why we are helping children who are disadvantaged to actually reach their full potential, and that's outlined. Children that are looked after as well historically do not achieve to their full potential, and the work that we've been doing on that. And something which is probably particularly relevant at the moment is pupils that are eligible for free school meals. Historically, there's been a gap in attainment between children from disadvantaged backgrounds and those that aren't, and we are actively monitoring and trying to tackle that. And never more so, it was something that was raised in a meeting that I was in with the Education Minister last week, is that the pressures and the impact of the pandemic and the various lockdowns and school closures that they've had on children, and looking at what we need to do going forward to make sure that they sort of the levels of disadvantage are turned around as soon as possible. And in one of the previous reports, it had mentioned about an emergency powers form, or use of emergency powers to provide laptops, etc., for children in schools. Well, we've had thousands of devices going out since the start of the pandemic. So this all is basically documenting the stuff that we've already done, but just to reassure Cabinet that the effort doesn't stop. It's going to continue, even without any need for statutory reports, that effort to make sure that all our children achieve their potential will carry on.
Yeah, I agree. Peter, come in, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's I would encourage anyone who's looking through the paperwork to work their way towards the end of the report. It's a bit disappointing. You have to get to the page 32 to see the Equality Objective 8, but I suppose the 8th one would be, wouldn't it? And I think it's very pleasing results on reducing the gender pay gap and employment opportunities for protected groups. I think that makes very pleasing reading. The only comment I would make is that I am nervous that because that was the year that ended March 2020, and I'm a little bit nervous as to how the past difficult year may or may not have influenced those figures, but nonetheless, very pleasing figures, and I would encourage people to read them.
Indeed, I was going to mention the thing in relation to children, but I knew Liz would. But I think it is an easy read in terms of things like what have we done, what have we learned, what are the challenges, what do we need to do. Simple but effective. And one of the things I was going to highlight, in fact, was because we've been in the pandemic. One of the things was things like the report of hate crimes and harassment and discrimination, which is highlighted here, and indeed in terms of domestic abuse and raise awareness of domestic abuse within the community, because clearly the pandemic has had a severe impact in terms of that from the reports that I've been seeing via the police and social care. So it is an issue when people are crammed up in the house, even more than they usually are, and tensions become raised. But we have to learn our lessons from it, and we have to do as much as we possibly can to protect those people who are the most vulnerable. So I endorse the comments within the report. I think we do need to learn some lessons from the pandemic year, and encapsulate that within the new updated strategy. So can I don't know if anybody can make any comment. I don't know if Rob, the Managing Director, wants to make any comment in relation to this or not, but otherwise we'll just move forward.
Nothing from me, Leader.
Okay, good, thank you. It's an interesting read, because I think it's quite interesting, because easy read as well. It's easy and it's easily understood, but it's equally as important. Okay, thank you. That should have been the end of mine, but it's not, so I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to bring forward item 22, which is support and recruitment and retention of qualified social workers and children and young people. And this, in some respects, chimes with the last report, if you think about it, with people, particularly in terms of the pandemic, and the fact that we do have an issue with qualified social workers and retention and recruitment, and this is trying to go some way forward in order to address those issues. So this is really to set out the challenges of the council to meet its statutory responsibilities, and they are major and many. And to ensure to do that, you have to recruit and retain a sufficient number of qualified social workers, particularly in terms of children and young people services, and to seek support in this case to enhance the salaries of posts in those teams that are hardest to recruit. It isn't something we would do easily, but it is something we've done in the past, and I think this is the right time to do it, because if you look at some of the comments within the report, this had been ongoing for a considerable period of time, and I think it's more pertinent today that we ensure that we retain our staff, but recruit them too, because one of the things that we're doing at the moment is we're actually having to backfill those posts with agency provision. So yes, this report asks us to spend more money on staff, which is right, but in the long term, it's probably going to be a cost saver, because the cost of agency work, it doesn't come cheap, and hopefully this will address it. So I will talk to it for a minute, but I just wanted to get that out there, because I think it's important that we don't do this willy-nilly. This has been going on for a considerable period of time. Because the ability to recruit and retain qualified social workers is central, as everybody thinks, to the effective work of the Social Services Department. We need to have stability in the workforce, and we therefore need to retain, train, and keep those within the teams, particularly into teams where intake and core work are the thrust of their business. But the problem with that particular work, obviously, is one of the most challenging areas to work into. And as the report says, that those staffing positions are not without issue. There is a long-standing, and if you look at the report, things have been ongoing since 2018 and later, where we tried to have recruitment and not been as successful as we could have done. And it is a national issue, because if you also see from the report, other authorities pay retainers and paying extra remuneration to their staff in order to keep it. And that's basically the crunch of this report. Some have, as I said, agreed enhancements, and others are currently looking at the situation. And this creates consequences for the Vale Glamorgan if the council isn't able to complete the terms of their salary offer, but also reliance on agency staff is getting less, because that's going to get more strained as time goes on. So it's proposed to enhance the salaries of the qualified social workers in the teams to improve workforce stability, to enable the local authority to meet its statutory obligations and responsibilities, and to support the delivery of robust services to children and families in the Vale of Glamorgan. It's also to recognise that in making this payment to the qualified social workers in those teams, the enhancement should be paid also to the practitioner and team managers to retain a differential. As I said, we have a responsibility to ensure there's sufficient social workers in children and young people services to meet the demand that meet the qualified social workers caseloads, and in keeping with the provisions of effective and timely care to support children and families. So in other words, it is imperative that we do this as quickly as possible. The report tells you that in September 2018 we tried to revise the structure, and it was hoped that that would encourage people to come. It didn't have the desired effect, but we're now in a position where the problem remains problematic and is crucial and critical. The demands on the intake and support team have increased considerably, particularly during the pandemic, as I said earlier. They fulfill a role fulfill an intake role, in other words, take children in and court roles, and they are always recognised as being the most challenging areas to recruit and retain, and that's the reason why we're where we are. There has to be some sort of life-work balance, and if you're in constant strain, then that is often an issue, and often an issue why we cannot keep staff, because we don't have enough and there's too much work upon them. It does need a step change. In October 2017, they also launched a bespoke recruitment program. So this has been going on for a long time. While it was far-reaching, the number of appointments were small. Again, in October 19, they had open adverts. And over the last 14 months, the open advert has achieved only 23 applications, resulting in only 4 appointments, and only 1 to the intake and family support team, which is the crucial one, and none into the care, planning and proceedings team, in both teams where significant vacancies remain. In November 2020, again, they tried this, but no qualified applications were received. So currently, and it's an important issue, is the intake family team, 67% of the qualified social workers are agency workers, an increase of 33% from 2019. And someone else has just handed in their notice. So an additional qualified, 4 qualified posts are to be agreed within this process too. And to meet the necessary capacity into intake and family support teams, and for the speed for those are to be brought through agency links at the moment. So we will still be using some agencies in the short term. But the whole point of this is that in the care planning procedures team, none of the 6 qualified social worker posts are permanently recruited, and 50% of the posts are filled at any one time. So we really need to do something about this. Basically, what the crux of the matter is that we are proposing, if you look at the authorities around us, Vale of Glamorgan, we don't have any enhancements. Bridgend are currently looking for enhancements. Cardiff pay 5,000 enhancement. RCT currently pay 2,000. Nice Port Talbot and don't at the moment, Glyna don't at the moment, but I understand they are also looking. So basically, what I'm asking is that we change the staff structure. We not only change the staff structure, but also the recruitment and remuneration. So the recommendations to be agreed to pay an enhanced salary by way of an annual allowance of £5,000, which is comparable with Cardiff. But as it also says in the report, Cardiff are also looking to review, and I hope that they won't be reviewing it above £5,000, because it would. But that's one of the issues. If you're carrying out this kind of work, and you can have more money elsewhere, then whether you like it or not, we live in a realistic world. So we need to meet those challenges. So the Cabinet agrees to pay an enhanced salary by way of an annual allowance of £5,000 to qualified social workers employed and recruited to the intake and family support and the care planning and proceeding teams. And in making the payments to the qualified social workers in those teams, the enhancement should be paid also to the practitioners and team managers. And I'm going to change the recommendation on recommendation 3 to delegate authority to the Director of Social Services in consultation with the Head of Human Resources, the Head of Finance, and the Executive Leader and Cabinet Member of Corporate Performance and Resources on the basis that this is a staffing issue, and to review and amend the annual allowance should this be required. This isn't an easy report, but it's a realistic report, and so I hope I've done it justice. But in case that I haven't, I'm going to ask. I don't know if Lance is here. I think Lance Carver, was the Director of Social Services, is here. I don't know if he wants to make any comment, and then I will also ask Paula. No, who's here? I don't know who's here. I'll have a look. Lance, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to whoever I was thinking of. Lance,
so do you want me to?
Yeah, if you want to add anything in relation to this.
Not particularly. I mean, the report is incredibly honest about the position that we are currently in and the difficulties that we face. And I suppose, you know, it was really good to hear you describe the different approaches that we've taken over a number of years to try and improve the position. But we just can't keep pace with our competitors, really, and so that's why we need to take this action. But no, it's all in the report, I think. So thank you.
Okay, all right, that's fair enough. I was going to see if there's anybody from HR, but I don't think there is. Not that it matters at this stage. I don't have anybody else. Any other officer wants to make any comment, because this is a step change, as it says in the report.
No, just Leader, thank you. Just very, very quickly, thank you to you and to the Cabinet for taking this action, because it is necessary. I think that the key issue here is we've looked at a number of other options before taking a step, and it's one area where we really do need that capacity and that resilience within the structure. And hopefully this will go some way in achieving that, particularly when you look at what some of the neighbouring authorities are either doing already or actually thinking of doing. So it's for us to stay competitive. Attracting staff is obviously important, but then once you attract staff, retaining them is just as important, if not more important. So hopefully this action will go some way to help us achieve that.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I see two other members want to come in. Margaret Wilkinson wants to come in, and Eddie Williams wants to come in too.
I think Eddie's hand was up first, so I don't know if he wants to go first.
He'll be magnanimous. Go on.
Right, I'm just saying I'm happy with that. I think we need to move quite quickly with this, because families and children need to see the same people, get confidence in them, and then that's when they open up. Because if they see people, might be a female this week, a male next week, it may be someone they just starting to get used to, and then that person disappears. And I think we need a certain person to communicate with these families, and I think we need to move on quite quickly with this. I'm all for this, and I'm happy to support it.
Good, thank you. Eddie.
Yes, thanks, Leader. You've gone into great depth, and it's you know, and quite rightly so, showing that a lot has been attempted over the last few years to try and address the problem, and we're still in the same position. It's clear, isn't it, that we need to encourage permanent staff in order so that we can keep a steady system going. One of the issues we have is that changeover with agency. Although they fill a need, it's often that change, as Mark was just indicating there. And certainly, one of the other sides that we want to give recognition to the social workers that are actually working for the Vale. Some of the issues they deal with, we know that this is just a a small amount compared to what, in comparison to situations they deal with. And so it's only right. And hopefully with more permanent staff in, we'll be able to deal with issues much earlier, so that they're less likely to become long-standing issues, which are some of the issues we've got. So fully support this vote going forward.
Okay, good, thank you. If no one else has got anything else, do we agree that it is a principle we've used before and it's a principle which we have to go forward with? Thank you, I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Next item is item 18, which is the proposed to market and dispose of the train shed for commercial leisure use. And this is a report of the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration.
Thank you, Leader. It's those words again, which could be misleading. They're official. As you said, it's to seek approval to market and dispose of the train shed for commercial leisure use. And the building is known as the train shed and forms part of BSC2. The council owns a freehold interest of property and it's managed by the Regen team, and it's located within the Innovation Quarter, which in itself is a joint venture between the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Welsh Government. So this yet again is another joint venture between the two organisations. The property was previously leased to Barry Railway Engineering Company, and this lease was terminated in 2020. So the building, the train shed, is now vacant. So it's proposed that the train shed and a small number of car parking spaces has been identified in an asset which could be used for commercial / leisure purposes, which in turn would add to the offer available in this location. And so work's been undertaken to explore a range of opportunities. And the property section, our property section's undertaken a preliminary marketing report that recommends that the property be advertised for let by informal tender process, and change of use may be subject to appropriate planning consent, you know, if necessary. But just a bit of background. I mean, the Innovation Quarter is a mixed-use regeneration development, which is about 19 acres, and it was purchased by the council with Welsh Development Agency funding, and as a result, as I said, it's a joint regeneration initiative. And just as a sort of a reminder, that the buildings that have been redeveloped as a result of that, the one behind me, the pump house conversion. Then there's also the Premier Inn and Brewers Fayre restaurant were built there, West Medical Centre, the original BSC, the Business Service Centre, and more recently, the mixed-use conversion of Hood Road Goodshed property with the adjacent shipping container village and apartment block for Newydd Housing Association. There are also plans currently for or working with Cardiff and Vale College to deliver a multi-million-pound art college campus within that area. So proposals for the suggested use were taken to the council's Insight Board and also to the Barry Regeneration Board, and were supported. Of interest, and I'd certainly be pleased that we'd be looking to rename the BSC2 as part of this redevelopment, because at the end of the day, unless you're local and have been here for a while, you wouldn't really know what BSC is. So we'd be looking at that. And a marketing brief is being prepared and will be advertised via the council's website and promoted via social media. So with that background, I think it's a really positive development for this area, and putting another piece in the sort of strategic jigsaw that we've been working to. And the recommendations are, there are 4 recommendations. The Cabinet declares the train shed surplus to requirements and authorises the marketing and disposal of the train shed at the BSC2. and a designated number of car parking spaces to the front of the building by virtue of a lease opportunity. So, as I mentioned at the start, we're not flogging it off. It is a lease. The Cabinet delegates authority to the Head of Regeneration and Planning in consultation with the leader, Cabinet Member for Education, Regeneration, Managing Director, and the Head of Finance, to market and dispose of the train shed identified, edged in red, in Appendix A to this report, and parking spaces by virtue of a lease for a leisure or other appropriate use in liaison with the operational manager regeneration and operational manager for property. So this is as I said, for leisure stroke commercial use. An awful lot of people will say, you know, is this going to be housing? No, it's not. It's not being offered for that. That Cabinet delegates authority to the monitoring officer stroke head of legal and democratic services to prepare, complete and execute all appropriate legal documentation associated with the leasing of the train shed at the BSC2 for a term of 10 years with a break clause at 5 years. So this isn't a long 99-year lease or whatever, this is 10 years with a potential break at 5. And finally, that authority be granted to the Head of Regeneration and Planning to utilise the commercial rental income for the maintenance of the building, and that any surplus income after, as we have to do, deducting any income due for payment to Welsh Government in accordance with the IQ joint venture, to be reinvested into regeneration initiatives. So again, any surplus that's made from leasing this property will actually come back into regeneration activity of the council. So on that, I so move. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. It's an obvious way forward. It is a continuation of what's happened in the innovation quarter. It is a continued use of BSC2 for that sort of business. I've got no problem with it. Everybody else has. If not, I will formally second and agree that it goes forward. Yeah, is that agreed? Good. Thank you very much. Next item is Digital Engagement and Volunteering Officer. This is a report to seek approval for the council to be the host employer of a Welsh Government funded digital engagement and volunteering officer, something which we've learned something about during the pandemic, I think. Margaret, over to you. You're on mute, Margaret.
I'm doing it now, Liz. I'm doing it. Thank you, Leader. This report has been adapted to reflect on the challenges posed by COVID-19 and sets how a digital proposal has been sorted for the vulnerable people that feels lonely and isolated. They have been affected by COVID, and we must move forward with an officer that can bring this together. The link with the key strategy recovery was on the 21st of September 2020. We are seeking to have someone to work with the officers of the council to set this up and straight away. Can I go to 1.6? Before COVID appeared, we had a proposal that had been given for a new development time banking officer.
Yeah.
So it's not something that we're just bringing out of somewhere now. It was already there. And then 1.8 is recognising the world has changed and we need to move forward with more people being involved on different telephones, laptops and different things for people, but we don't want to leave the vulnerable and the lonely behind. In Appendix A, you see how it's set out. There would be how they would work with their job description and that, and there is only one recommendation, and I'm asking for approval of that, and the recommendation is that Cabinet grants approval for the council to be the host employer of the Welsh Government funded digital engagement officer to support residents to volunteer using digital means. and it'll be grants from the Welsh Government as well. So that's what I'm asking.
Good. I see nothing wrong with that. I think we learned a lot from COVID, and yeah, time banking was an issue. But when you have time banking, it means you have to work with people and you have to negotiate with people. Whereas this is talking about those people who feel themselves isolated, vulnerable, etc.
Yeah.
And it's a funded post. So I'm happy to second it. And if anybody has any comments to make. But it does fit in with our quality strategy too.
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay, I'm happy with that. If anybody else is, I'll happy to second that. Yes, all agree. Thank you. Margaret, over to you. This next one is basically to present the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan 2021 for approval. It has to go to council for decision. It follows on from the reports that I brought earlier on in terms of capital program, and also in terms of the rental and that sort of stuff in terms of the housing revenue account. So Margaret, so over to you. This is basically a plan to show that we've got a viable 30-year plan, which is good.
Yeah, this report sets out the council's 30-year business plan for housing in support of the council's major repair allowance investment from the Welsh Government. And it goes into the report. I mean, 1.1, the Welsh Government requires all local authorities to retain their housing stock to submit annual account of business plans and finance forecast in the form of a 30-year finance model. So it's all there in the report. And Appendix 1 is, you can read into everything that's going on, but there is only 2 recommendations. The Cabinet approves the Housing Business Plan 2021 to 51, attached Appendix 1 to this report, that the report are submitted to full council for approval prior to submitting to the Welsh Government.
Yep, that's fine, that's good. It's also predicated, as indeed the housing revenue account was predicated on the major repairs allowance. Yeah. But there's also a note here, which I spotted the other day, was the submission as forms the basis of the compensation award, which was formerly the repairs allowance. And I don't know much about that. Perhaps we could have a chat about that sometime. But this is also assuming that the £2.7 million goes forward to as it has done in the last 18 years, as far as I can remember. It's always been £2.7 million, never inflated, unfortunately. No. But yeah, this makes sense. This is a business plan, 30 years. It stacks up. Happy to second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Next item is item 21, which is a part 1 and a part 2 report, I think. Is to obtain approval to award contracts to the supply of a new asset management and mobile working system for neighbourhood services and transport. Peter.
Thanks so much there, Leader. Yes, neighbourhood services. I've got my yes. Neighbourhood services currently has an existing model and asset management system in place for the highway maintenance, street works and street lighting. But we were informed that the current supplier, this version is not going to be continued, which set about a few things that are covered in the report. Basically, we've got a software system that we need to upgrade or move on. And what the report does is explains how we've gone through various benchmarking exercises and worked out what we actually need and how we need it. And I think the salient parts come under part 2, but this is just paving the way and explaining why we need to do this. And so what I'm asking is that there's a number of recommendations. I must make sure I've got the right ones. Yes, that at this stage, the Cabinet notes the requirements for a fit-for-purpose asset management and mobile working platform for neighbourhood service and transport, and the assets of options undertaken, with a view to taking a decision on this matter later on in the agenda under part 2.
Okay, fair enough. Says it all. Everybody agree?
No, Eddie wants to come in.
Oh, Eddie, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Thanks, Leader. Yeah, it's quite important, this, isn't it? You think you just start buying some software, but we all know that it's what is looking after that we're trying to look after, and certainly it's time that we did improve our highways and etc. etc. So let's just say that the western part of the Vale are looking forward to the improvement that this may come along.
Fair point. Okay. Right. Hang on a second. Where are we now? Right. I'm going to have to go back now. I'm now going to go back to the proposed fees and charges report, if I can, which was item 12. Yeah, it was, and also the reference from the corporate performance and resources. There were some issues that were raised in that report. Basically, there was concern about the cost of football pitches at one time because they haven't been used. But one of the things that one has to remember is they still have to be maintained during the period. There was also a query in relation to filming on roads and whether or not any of that money could be recircled or recycled into helping with the infrastructure. There was also some clarification requested in relation to the Cafe Style licenses because there was some confusion there, and in fact that has been addressed in this report. In terms of the Cafe licenses, they are contained within the report itself, but what it does do, and what I should say at this stage is Liz has left the building, so she has actually left the meeting at this stage because it's an item which she's declared an interest in. The Cafe licenses, I think, needs a bit more work, but in general terms, the report has in general inflation increase of 0.7% throughout it. The report did refer to, and this reference did refer to Telecare, hence the reason Liz decided to withdraw from the meeting. But in general terms, it was accepted that fees and charges would go on and go up. The major issue, as far as I recall, was the Cafe licenses, and a further report will come to the scrutiny committee in respect of income levels, utilisation, and the rationale for fees and charges. That's what came from them. But basically, if you go into the report itself, the proposals were. Let me find them because I want to find them. It's on. Typically, it's not page. It's on Appendix 1A and 1B. It talks about highways, Cafe Style licenses to trade on a highway. The recommendation now is that, subject to a separate report to be considered by Cabinet, and that covers all the areas, and indeed also the outside trading area for the sale of goods outside the trading areas, no more than 10 square meters, etc. So they're within the report. They're the ones that have been changed since then. There was a mistake, I think, in terms of the Telecare VCAS, which should have been £1.24 and not £1.30, and I think that's been changed in the report. But if it hasn't, let's note that and make sure that it is changed. Sorry, I should have looked and I haven't. I didn't find it when I was looking the other day anyway. Right, but basically, so this just seeks, it's a matter for the Cabinet to determine. It seeks approval of the fees and charges for 21-22. The fees are generally going up by 0.7%, but there are some exemptions. There are some that stay the same, some go up slightly more. As I said, the Corporate Performance Committee has considered it. There's an Equalities Impact Assessment at Appendix 5, and basically the recommendations is that the notes of the contents of the report be noted that the Cabinet considers the reviews of the Scrutiny Committee as we have, and particularly in terms of the Cafe licenses, so they've been taken out. In terms of the football, I think we will accept as it stands at the moment, but the scrutiny committee will be receiving a report in due course in relation to some of those things anyway. So that 2, that the Cabinet considers and reviews the scrutiny committee, are we done? And 3, that the Cabinet approve the proposals for the amendments to the fees and charges of the associated policy and process changes, can't get my teeth in, as set out in the report and appendices to take effect from the 1st of April 2021. Peter, do you want to come in at this stage?
Well, I think you more or less said everything I was going to say. The only thing I would probably like to add is that there was never any intention to change to charge businesses for the cafe license fees until the lockdown arrangements were relaxed and the businesses were operating using both their external and internal trading spaces. And so I think that was the bit that was perhaps lost in the original report. It wasn't perhaps as clear as it should have been, and caused some distress at scrutiny. So I think we've mopped that up. But you know, I am asking that the current arrangements for the cafe license are continued at no cost to assist the traders in recovering from the effects of pandemic until such time the new fee structure can be agreed by this committee, by this cabinet.
So you're going to add that as an extra recommendation that the current cafe license fees, albeit they are 0, continue until the pandemic is either over or restrictions are released, so that we can consider those in detail. But it does say that there will be a further cabinet report in relation to those anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, thanks, Leader. Yep, I can provide the wording later, but yes, but that's exactly it.
Okay, all right. Catherine, you want to come in? Catherine?
You're on mute.
I know. Oh, I know. I was trying to unmute myself. I was only going to formally second, that was all. I won't do it again.
Right, okay. I know there was an issue in terms of the football charges, but there's always an issue in terms of the football charges, to be honest. And we still have the issue of maintenance to address. Okay, don't worry, Catherine. Okay, so are we happy with the recommendations of the report plus the addition that the current cafe license fees of nil will continue for the time being, or wherever they are at the time being for the moment will continue for the time being until the new report comes forward. But it is kind of covered in that, but we'll do that. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Good. Thank you. Clear as mud. Okay. The next item is the pay policy review.
Leader, I'm just going to let Councillor Burnett back in, or tell her to come back in.
I don't know if I can.
No, do it. It's okay. I'll do it. I'll do it.
All right. So, well, Matt could ask her to come back if she wants to. In terms of the pay policy, the senior members are going to have to leave, but before they do, normally what happens is she's back. Right, and the senior membership will leave, but we will obviously keep the member taking the minutes in relation to this. This is basically the pay policy went there, and it came to scrutiny previously, and it's got to go on to the 10th of March. There was no particular issue in relation to this, except for one part in relation to those officers who could be retained after retirement, and there was an argument about whether or not the wording could be better presented. So what I'm going to recommend here is that we note the request of the cabinet of the scrutiny committee to consider amending the revised pay policy and present it at the meeting, and we will take it to the 10th of March. This is the easiest to do, I think. So we will just take it straight to the 10th of March. We note the comments. We approved the pay policy previously. Scrutiny didn't have any comment really, apart from the issues in terms of the final point in the policy. But there are obviously issues in relation to local government elections and elections bill and election payments and the fact that there might have changed in managing director's name. But to be honest, this is a recommendation I just want to note, but a full and updated report will appear at Council on 10th of March. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So there was something in that in but we couldn't have the officers here, that's all. Okay. Right. Where am I now? In terms of the other items, I don't have anything under part 1, but I do have an item under part 2, which is the Neighbourhood Services Asset Management and Mobile Working Scheme. So because we have an item for discussion under part 2 in the agenda, which is part of Peter's report, Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport, there are either confidential or privileged information within it, and they can be discussed under part 2. Therefore, myself and the Cabinet will remain that the recording is then closed at this point, and we will ensure that only relevant parties remain to hear the detailed items to be discussed. And following the meeting, the outcome of the part 2 discussions will formally be captured as part of the minutes of the meeting, advising all the parties of the final decision of the Cabinet for this time, for this item, I should say. So at this stage, I have no items under part 1. I am formally closing the meeting, and then I will reconvene under part 2.
Yeah, move part 2.
Thank you very much, Margaret. So we will wait for the recording to stop.